on how should we punish people who cause problems in our society. And one of the things, a couple of things emerged from that course, and a lot of things actually, but one of them was that in our own sense of justice, one theory of punishment is called rehabilitative theory of punishment. That is, you want to bring things into the person's life to rehabilitate them. You want them to change. You want them to no longer cause harm to other people and to themselves, and instead be healed or be rehabilitated and go on to live a relatively a life, at least, that's not harming other people. So that's one desire of our own sense of justice, and that came out in this course. But there was another thing, is that not everybody wants to be rehabilitated. I mean, there are certain hardcore criminals that they like to kill people, they like to torture people, they like to steal. They just, I mean, I've run into people who just laugh, just mock people who work and earn money because they just take it for free. And now they might get caught once in a while, but they sneer and mock at what we would call good, upstanding people. So what about those people? Well, our own justice system has another plan for those people. And that is, if you can't rehabilitate the perpetrator, then you need to somehow contain the evil. You need to restrain that person from continuing on to cause harm to themselves and other people. Somehow restrain them. And so when you think about that, what happens if this life doesn't end when your body dies? What happens then? What happens because God said he created us as living souls. When he talks about Adam, he says he created Adam, the first living soul, and our body is what we dwell within. It's described as a tent, a vessel, a jar of clay. There's lots of words that use to that. And it's a critical, important part of us. But at some point, it's going to die in this life. And so then what? What will you do then? Because you still continue to exist as a living soul, or at least as a soul. So there's some controversy even as, what does it mean to be spiritually dead and spiritually alive? And there are so many rabbit holes we could dive down here. It isn't even funny, but let's just stick with what happens when a person who has resisted God's offer of flawless satisfaction of justice so that he could then activate flawless or engage in the flawless demands of love for that person. But they've rejected that. Well, they're in a state now of being able to eternally continue to cause harm, possibly to others, other souls, certainly to themselves. But causing harm is not just the fact that you're there in God's polluting the world, polluting the cosmos, or even polluting the spiritual realm. That's a problem. It needs to be contained. And so from our own system of justice, we can derive two things. God would, first of all, desire to rehabilitate the person. And the rehabilitation aspect is the whole reason Christ came. It's the gospel, so that you could be spiritually reborn. You could come back to life again and eventually in eternity be a flawless and perfect and pure human being.
In relationship with God and in relationship with others.
With each other and with God. And that is entirely contingent on putting our faith in God to make that happen, because we can't make it happen. But if we choose the other option, as we do with criminals here in this life, we put them in a penitentiary, which is not at all pleasant, but it needs to be contained. Then there has to be some other ultimate containment place for evil. And this is called hell. But it's not just a containment place for evil. There's another analogy I'd like to use here, and that's a cemetery. So at my age, I've had people that I dearly love that have passed on. And even though I dearly love them, they have wound up, we have to put them in a cemetery, either cremate and bury the ashes or put the body in a cemetery, but we have to bury that. We have to do something with the body so that it's not going to cause medical problems. If I just kept all my dead loved ones in the house with me, and that would be sick. They even have horror movies about that sort of thing, but it would be very unhealthy biologically. In the same way, if we are spiritually dead, that spiritual rot causes a a kind of spiritual corruption that we see in the news every day. And so when you see all the stuff that's going on in this world, what people are doing to each other, that is evidence of a spiritual decay within each person. So just as we have to bury our loved ones in a cemetery, so there has to be a cemetery of the soul, so that the rot and corruption of a spiritual sort of death is contained as well, or we're protected from that. And so there again, we arrive at this concept of what we call hell, the ultimate cemetery of the soul for those who will be spiritually dead forever, or the ultimate penitentiary to contain evil.